Viktor Orban versus Friedrich Merz. How the Hungarian Prime Minister challenges. Brussels and Berlin, the ongoing confrontation between Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban and key political figures in the European Union, particularly the chairman of Germany's Christian Democratic Union, CDU, Friedrich Merz, has intensified sharply in recent weeks. What began as a disagreement over energy policy and European solidarity has escalated into an open political clash, exposing the deep fractures within the European Union. On one side, those who advocate for deeper integration and collective decision-making, and on the other, those who prioritize national sovereignty above all else, a conflict with symbolic weight. Viktor Orban has long been recognized as one of the EU's most vocal critics, often portraying himself as a champion of member states resisting what he perceives as excessive interference from Brussels. His recent speeches and public appearances clearly signal a willingness to engage in direct confrontation with EU leadership and prominent German politicians. Orban's rhetoric not only rallies domestic support, but also sends deliberate messages to the broader European community, positioning Hungary as a defiant actor within the EU framework. Recently, Orban addressed tens of thousands of supporters in Budapest. The crowd waved Hungarian flags, while Orban spoke of freedom and peace, insisting that these principles would prevail despite Brussels. The speech functioned on multiple levels. It was a domestic demonstration of strength and simultaneously a pointed message to Europe that Hungary will no longer be dictated to by EU mandates. The resonance of his words was felt far beyond Hungary's borders. European capitals such as Berlin and Brussels listened attentively, aware that Hungary's independent stance in energy and foreign policy matters challenges the EU's cohesion. While many member states strive for a unified approach to Russia and energy security, Hungary continues to pursue a pragmatic yet confrontational course, emphasizing national interests over collective policy. The core issues, energy, sanctions and sovereignty, at the heart of this dispute lies energy policy. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the EU introduced extensive measures aimed at reducing reliance on Russian oil and gas. The Repower EU program, a central pillar of this strategy, obliges all member states to end existing energy contracts with Russia by 2028 and prohibits the initiation of new deals with Russian suppliers. For countries like Hungary, this directive presents significant challenges. A substantial portion of Hungary's energy needs is still supplied via the Russian Druzhba pipeline, which runs through Ukraine and into Central Europe. Orban has consistently argued that a sudden halt to these supplies would severely impact both the Hungarian economy and everyday life for the population. From his perspective, compliance with EU mandates without exemptions would be economically reckless and politically unjustifiable. Brussels, on the other hand, has accused Hungary of undermining the Union's collective energy strategy and indirectly supporting Russia. The tension between the two sides is stark. The EU emphasizes solidarity and unified action, while Hungary insists on preserving its independence and safeguarding national interests. The Brussels Summit. Merz confronts Orban. The discord reached a peak during the recent EU summit in Brussels, where media reports highlighted a heated exchange between Viktor Orban and Friedrich Merz, who has positioned himself as a strong advocate for a tough stance against Hungary. During the meeting, Merz reportedly confronted Orban directly, criticizing Hungary's perceived lack of solidarity and emphasizing that European unity is not optional but a binding obligation. Orban's response, calm yet pointed, became instantly newsworthy. He leaned back, smiled, and is reported to have said, essentially, "While Germany freezes, Hungary functions, and that seems to bother you." The remark quickly spread through international media. In Hungary, it was celebrated as evidence of Orban's unwavering resolve, whereas in Brussels, it provoked outrage. Observers described the atmosphere at the summit as tense, and at times openly hostile, underscoring the symbolic weight of the confrontation. Rhetorical escalation and political maneuvering. Shortly after the summit, reports emerged that the European Commission, in coordination with Germany, was preparing new measures to hold countries reliant on Russian energy more accountable. The proposals require member states to submit national plans for diversifying energy sources, even if these measures conflict with their immediate preferences or economic realities. Hungary perceives these steps as a direct intrusion into its political and economic sovereignty. Orban himself criticized the term diversification in a recent radio broadcast, stating, "How can one talk about diversification when we are being forced to abandon our most reliable energy sources? If one pipeline is closed, only one remains. That is not diversification, that is coercion." He further accused Brussels of hypocrisy, advocating energy security while simultaneously blocking functional supply routes. The prospect of Hungary being partially excluded from EU financial mechanisms should it resist these new directives provoked particularly strong reactions from Budapest. Friedrich Merz and the German perspective. Friedrich Merz, acting as the opposition leader in Germany, has repeatedly criticized Orban in recent months. He frames Hungary's stance not merely as a policy disagreement, but as a potential threat to EU stability. In various interviews, Merz stressed that individual member states cannot be allowed to obstruct the course of the entire Union. When member states consistently defy European decisions, we must respond with consequences, Merz explained. No one should assume that solidarity applies only when it is convenient. For Merz, the dispute with Orban extends beyond energy concerns. It represents a fundamental question about Europe's future. Should the EU pursue deeper integration, or should national governments be allowed to chart independent paths, even when these decisions undermine collective cohesion? Orban interprets Merz's critiques as proof that Brussels and Berlin are intolerant of independent voices within Europe. In response, he boldly asserts, "Perhaps the problem is not with us, but with the fact that Hungary simply works, a broader struggle beyond energy." The public confrontation also reflects wider political and ideological stakes. Orban leverages the conflict to position himself as a defender of national interests and conservative values, consistently highlighting Hungary's strict immigration policies, family-centered social framework, and controlled energy prices. His narrative contrasts sharply with that of many Western European states, framing Hungary as a model of pragmatic governance and independence. This rhetoric resonates with citizens not only in Hungary, but also in other EU countries, where dissatisfaction with Brussels' perceived overreach is growing. Orban has thus become a symbol of an alternative Europe, one emphasizing autonomy and pragmatism over centralized control. Critics, however, see Orban as emblematic of obstructionism, nationalism, and policies undermining European solidarity. They point out that Hungary benefits significantly from EU funding while simultaneously challenging the Union's core principles, particularly those related to rule of law and democratic standards. Legal and political outlook. Diplomats indicate that the EU is considering proceedings under Article 7 or infringement procedures that could sanction Hungary. These measures would address not only energy policy, but also broader concerns, including judicial reforms, media freedom, and anti-corruption efforts. Orban's government has signaled its intent to legally contest potential EU regulations. Budapest is preparing lawsuits targeting specific aspects of the REPowerEU directive, particularly the obligation to terminate existing gas contracts by 2028, and is demanding either compensation or special exemptions. The Prime Minister has stressed Hungary's readiness to exercise its veto within the EU, declaring, "We are not bluffing. If Brussels shuts off the tap, we will turn it back on." A deepening rift within the European Union. The conflict between Orban and Merz highlights a deeper division within the EU, not only between economic interests, but also regarding political philosophy. While Germany, France, and the European Commission push for greater integration, countries like Hungary and occasionally Slovakia demand more national autonomy. This confrontation has come to symbolizes the EU's current predicament, a struggle between centralized authority and national sovereignty, between collective solidarity and individual interests. Political analysts view it as a fundamental challenge. Until the EU develops effective mechanisms to resolve such disputes without escalation, leaders like Orban will continue to exploit systemic weaknesses for political advantage, a political and symbolic power struggle. Orban has demonstrated that confrontation can be a deliberate political strategy. Each public clash with Brussels or Berlin reinforces his image as a defender of Hungarian interests. In his most recent speech, he described Hungary as a small stone in Europe's shoe, uncomfortable yet impossible to ignore. This self-characterization underpins his political success. By portraying himself as an outsider, Orban galvanizes his supporters and compels his opponents to respond to his agenda. In contrast, Friedrich Merz aims to represent an EU that enforces clear rules and consequences. Yet, the harder Brussels pushes, the more Orban's domestic position is fortified. Conclusion: a dispute with implications for all of Europe. The confrontation between Viktor Orban and Friedrich Merz is more sheer than a personal clash. It epitomizes the rising tension within the European Union between integration and independence, economic pragmatism, and political principles. Orban has made it clear that Hungary will resist EU mandates perceived as detrimental to national interests, while Merz and other European leaders insist that solidarity cannot be treated as optional. The ultimate outcome of this power struggle remains uncertain. Should Hungary persist in charting its own course, other member states may be emboldened to follow suit. If Brussels succeeds in asserting compliance, it would signal that the EU is capable of enforcing authority over its members. Regardless of the eventual resolution, the confrontation marks a turning point in European politics. It underscores the urgent question of balancing European unity with national sovereignty, and tests whether the EU can manage internal tensions without fracturing. The Orban-Merz dispute has become a defining moment, one that illustrates both the fragility and resilience of the European project in the 21st century.